computer. And I'm just letting it run red for a second. Let me let the intro play.
WV Uncommon Place. This podcast is a variety podcast that houses numerous series to cover mental health, empowerment, podcast framework, and various intimate theories to get to know the hosts, along with occasional movies reviews and dives in pop culture with our event podcast episode. The Uncommon Place digs into bringing guests on that stories don't fit the mold and are very different. WV stands for the great state of West Virginia, and every quarter we cover something in West Virginia. Stacey and myself, JR, are your hosts, so please come along for this venture to our Uncommon Place.
Greetings, everybody. I'm JR. It's been a while. We know that I was down with a little bit of an illness for a moment, and I'm back. And this is the first interview that I've done in coming back. And I have a special guest with me. Her name is Heather, and her last name is Ferri. And it's fairy the way that I think of a fairy, not the way you're thinking of a fairy. It's Ferri. And she is here with us to talk about some interesting and some topics that we cover under our mental health wing of things, PTSD, ADHD, and childhood trauma. Those three things there later on show up in life when you get older. They happen when you're young. And the one thing about a childhood trauma, that is something that a lot of people don't always get to deal with. And also, she's here to tell us about her illustrious dancing career. Also, and then she's going to tell us about a discipline that she has about 8 sciences. Is that correct, Heather?
Yeah.
So look, let me do this real quick. Let me just hand the floor over to you. You introduced yourself to everybody, but I need you to do one thing special for me.
Okay.
I need you to teach us one thing that a grandparent taught you as a child.
Um, so okay. Well, it's going to go into my storyline. I would say my maternal grandmother taught me by just being around her on the weekends that she smoked all day long and repressed her truth and her emotions, and that she was in essence masked up or sort of felt trapped in a marriage and in a situation. And so her behavioral patterns, our family would make sort of jokes or comedy acts with each other and the characters. But later in life, when I came back from my New York career and I actually got to sit at the kitchen table with her, and my grandfather had passed away, she started to take off those masks. With me, nobody knew about that. And she started to prophesize my life. And so this woman that everybody sort of just saw as a housewife, didn't really see much else, here she is speaking wisdom with a cup of tea. And in that wisdom, years later, that journey of a lot of hardships, betrayal, sickness, I now know that I am healing generational bloodline, generational curses.
Okay, and I thank you for that because that is something that so many adults, and you've obviously been caught in this thing too, and I got caught into it. We The generational trauma, unless we have some ancestry, which I mean our grandparents or someone other than our parent, because our parent gives us whatever trauma we get, and that comes from their grandparents or from whoever gave it to them, whoever raised them. Um, I'm glad that you and your grandmother were able to sit down and talk about that. Now let's go back a little bit. Let's go back in time, back to your upbringing. What in your upbringing made you who you are today?
Well, I would say part of my upbringing is the fact that we have a soul. And so you have soul database information, you say you're outside the box. So I sort of challenge organized religion in the sense that Jesus taught reincarnation. and meditation. There's a lot of, theories about that. So if you're meditating and you're understanding that your soul either reincarnates here or lives on somewhere, which is a question to ask yourself. For me, I didn't train in those things. They came up through the healing, through the shaking, through the crying, through the, masterful brain protocols I work with, but through the idea, and then seeing my clients obviously too. So through that idea, I would say I give myself credit for enduring a household that was very complicated, especially with my mother. Having my mother go from one person to extreme other, where she's basically trying to murder me every day for no reason, and is now jealous, and now my whole world's changed as a little girl. As a beautiful hearted little girl, I'm in a household where my mother is supposed to be taking care of me, and now she's trying to kill me. That doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? So I'm trying to navigate by being the perfect child, by absorbing everybody's stuff, which is common with healers and caretakers. Not a great quality, by the way, but common. And she, obviously being grander than grand, loved the arts and show business. So I went into that studying it 24/7. Now I was good at it. I was extremely talented in tap dancing and choreographing, and it was an incredible outlet for me. And I went on to have a great showbiz career. But when I left show business, I wanted nothing to do with it at all. And that's when I went into 18 years of becoming what I call a trauma expert. And now I'm going back into show business, my own terms, doing shows and writing music in my own way, in my own terms, with my own contracts. So it's like interesting. Like, I think what allowed me to endure that household was the tap shoes, was the fact that I could, channel and go into music and go into skits and go into shows creatively, because I couldn't do psychology on my parents at the time. You know what I mean? Like, you're a little child that just wants to be fed. You know what I mean? So I literally had to escape into that world of theater arts.
Okay, and I like that, and I like your story about your mother because I have a similar one. Basically, my father passed away when I was 9, and my mom become a schizophrenic manic depressant. So she went from being my mother to my friend, and eventually I became the father as I am today to her now. And I understand that trauma, and then you lose a little bit of respect on the level of accountability and responsibility because you got to become accountable and responsible for them. So you were like you were saying, you were talking about that you went through multiple disciplines, and these disciplines you went through, they're 8 sciences. Could you go into detail what your eight sciences are, and how they made a difference for you and how they would make a difference for other people?
Sure. I mean, that always catches people off guard because usually we have in America, people specialize in one thing, So I want to sort of challenge the status quo I hear, because even in show business, I'm going to go to there for a minute. When I was in New York City, you can be a dancer, you could be a dancer singer, you could be a dancer singer actor. Those were called triple threats. Those were people that had talent to a high level in those, and that's what I became, right? You could be a writer, you could be a choreographer. So I think what the arts I mention this because it is a very important outlet and respect we need to get back into America specifically, is the theater arts. What it helps is it helps brain activity. It helps connect the body awareness. It helps connect you to discipline. If you don't have discipline, you're going to have a tough time working with me as a trauma expert. And I've fired many clients, unfortunately, because I'm not here to spoon feed you. I'm not here to talk every week about your problems. I'm here to help you get disciplined and do brain protocols. So what are the sciences? Well, the sciences came in because I was led, some could say, through the higher realms, through whatever you believe in. Obviously, I connect to what I call the divine mother, the woman, the mother earth, the energy of this creation. But I was led to all these sciences. And as a mad scientist, because I had no ego wrapped around it, I could throw out a science. Oh, everybody's coming to me, doctors, scientists, people from this state and this state. They all have the same issues. They've all done these sciences and they've worked for a little bit, but they're not actually getting to roots. There's still problems coming up. Okay, so I'm going to throw those out and then I'm going to try. That's how I worked. And I also used my own sciences. So I was working 8-10 hours a day, full time, which trauma works heavy, probably, too much. But then I was working on myself. So I had no life for over a decade. That's how you become a master at anything. So if you want to be a master dancer, you're going to be in the dance room 8 hours a day training. If you want to be a master martial artist, you're going to be in the room with your instructor. So I train people to master themselves and master their lives and become their own masters. In what, even in healing, everybody's capable of it. Doesn't matter who you are. I came from blue collar. You know what I mean? I just came from a database that had a lot of information. So maybe you're not as advanced as me, but it doesn't mean that in your profession, whatever it is, you can't be a healer. So your question, I haven't navigated it. I'm getting to it. What are the sciences? One of them is water education. If you're drinking toxic forever chemicals, if you're drinking out of plastic, I've had over 18 years of studying water. That means testing it. PHORP, seeing how the corporations try to disguise things to fool you. I'm not just drinking clean water. I work with a Japanese medical device. I have to be very political online, because we have a health sort of propaganda thing happening in America. But a lot of people don't understand when I say that. I'm going to give you an example. In Japan, they have 7 different types of waters in their hospital. They're electrolyzed reduced water, and there's a lot of PubMed research. So when you have traumas, you tend to eventually get different types of sicknesses. So I used to, because I was choked from the throat, I used to have ear infections, throat infections. So I take 2.7 electrolyzed reduced water from this device, and I gargle it when I have a sore throat, strep throat, and that bacteria, that infection dies within 5 minutes. That's what Japan uses. They're number one in wound care. So when I show it on my Facebook page, I go through an ancestral detox of an ancestor from my maternal bloodline with slavery and trafficking. And I have all these rashes all over my body start to come up with swelling. So I use 4 different waters in the Japanese device to heal that skin issue within 2 weeks. That's huge, but that takes a whole industry out of the United States when people have acne and skin issues, because some of those issues are dealing with protective issues, psychological issues, and then some of them are dealing with glyphosate. They're dealing with the poisons in the water and the food. So I soak in a different type of water, a mineral water. So that's a whole education that I learned as I got more doctors and scientists as clients. They had no education on any of this stuff. And yet you go into a hospital. I mean, anybody can go in a hospital right now and see the vendor machines. You can see what they're serving people. It's not at all what I'm telling you. So that's the empowerment of empowering the American people. But here's the difference. I didn't have any financial support. I was working at one point back then, 3 jobs, I'm a worker. I'm not a complainer. So that's why I fire clients. I don't deal with laziness or complaining. I deal with people that want to show up and heal and make a better life. And that's going to take uncomfortableness. That's going to take finding the warrior you didn't even know was in you. That's going to take maybe your whole tribe talking against you. That was me. I had to leave my biological tribe twice. I had to leave many tribes in business because of the narcissist being the leader and not wanting, or things happening behind closed doors. So, I can do that because I know I have a soul. If you have a soul and you believe you have a soul, then you have consequences and you can never escape the bad doings. That's what I believe in. So water's education is number one. What I learned over the years, I started out doing 1 hour private sessions, then 2 hour private sessions with clients. Then I realized they needed so much more time. What I started to realize is I had to put more systems together and qualify the clients coming to me. And one was they had to detox a little bit, because when you come from trauma, you usually have some sort of bad habit, whether it's you're drinking a lot of soda pop. I was a sugar addict, so I'm not judging you, or you're eating a lot of sugar or junk food. And so I would say, okay, you've got to detox a little bit before we even get into the trauma work. Because if you have the discipline and the love to detox a little bit, which means water and food, then I know that you qualify as a student of mine. Does that make sense? Like
That does make sense.
so that goes into the foundation. You are your lifestyle. So if you're drinking crap all day and you're eating crap all day, it's still going to be hard to heal trauma. All right. So you have to deal with those two categories of food and water. And then breath work. I have free playlists on my YouTube channel, Heather Ann Ferri, and I encourage everybody to do them. It's like doing a college course for free. And I worked in colleges. They're free. One is called Breath Work for Leaders. One is called Breath Work for Emotional Pain, Trauma. And they're the foundation before you even get to what I call sacred brain protocols. And that foundation is not being taught enough. I'm not a quick fix. This society needs to get past the hacks. I'll get, you hear these talks on social media platforms of like people saying, well, I'm going to give you the 5-minute key. You can't do that in healing sexual abuse and physical abuse. Those people are clueless. There's something wrong. I'm just telling you right now. I wish if I had the pill, I would have invented it by now. So you have to discipline. But what's the beautiful thing about doing the breath work on the YouTube channel is, guess what? You start to master yourself. And the devil or evil or whatever you want to believe in does not want that. They want you to stay hooked to just listening all day and not doing anything and drinking your soda pop. So you got to understand, what is your motivation to heal? If you don't have a motivation to heal, you're not going to heal. You can be around the master all you want. You're still not going to heal. That's why I had to kick people out of my classroom, right? A good teacher is going to know and qualify their students. Not about being perfect. People come in a mess, but they're doing their homework being a mess, right? You can tell the difference. There's a difference between doing homework and working on yourself and then just lying. The pathological liars, the complainers. I could complain all day long. I've had a hard life. I don't wear it. People go, oh you look so young. Yeah, you may want to follow some of my protocols. That's, you know what I mean? You may want to follow the science that you're asking about. So breath work leads to body and brain work. There is scientific body work that I teach my clients with breath to understand where they're tight and holding emotional pain or physical abuse or sexual memories. And you'll be surprised, 50-year-olds that had no idea and forgot about their childhood and things that happened. Why is it important to remember? Well, anti-aging. How do you want to live the last chapter of your life? Dementia, Alzheimer's, cancers? Or do you want to live it happy and prosperous into the next? That's your decision. And that's where I inspire you that the work matters. So breath work is vital, and you're going to need it if you have a lot of trauma and getting into the advanced techniques. So I taught body work, and then I taught my clients how to involuntary shake, which has been taught, Peter Levine books. Sometimes if they don't know any of this, I'll have them read books or see certain videos. So a lot of times you do need an expert with you because you're scared, and that's acceptable. I mean, it's foreign. We are afraid to do what animals do naturally. Animals shake when they're after their battle. They go in the fields and they shake. Kids usually want to, and we stop them. We shouldn't do that. So involuntary shaking for me was scary because I trained as a professional dancer. I control my body. I know that's how you become, so I had to do the opposite. I had to let go of the control and let things come out, which is scary at first for people type A personality, OCD. You're starting to shake, but I teach people because I want them to eventually be able to do things at home. and become their own teacher and healer. And I'm the guide. So you have breath work, you have body work with breath work. You're writing. I'm asking you questions. There's questions in my book that's just out on Amazon, Transcending Victim to Goddess. Then the brain work. The brain work is a game changer, and I'm glad I kept it sacred with all the stuff coming out online in America right now and all the fakeness of teachers that have been on big platforms and this and that, because, it's nothing like taking one of these people that are fake and taking sacredness and destroying it. The PTSD, OCD, ADHD, and childhood brain protocols all are different. They have PubMed research, believe it or not. And they're not just about rewiring those particular labels. They're about also you training and heightening the areas of your brain that were, let's say, weak or not working to the highest, advancement. So when I first started healing trauma for myself, I couldn't really write a paragraph. I couldn't really read 3 pages. That's how much brain damage I had. Now I can read a book a day.
Whoa.
So we can advance the brain with the brain protocol. So even if you say, I don't have ADHD, you still benefit from it. You would still heighten intuition. You would still heighten all kinds of layers that we haven't even scientifically measured because we haven't put these brain protocols into mainstream science. And so for me, as much as, I know there's a big AI movement and there are some things that are very beneficial in using AI for, we should still have a human develop movement. And the human develop movement is healing generational traumas, because if you don't have them, they go through the bloodline, like you and I know, and then they keep getting passed down. That doesn't heighten our abilities of psychic, intuitive, higher, good human beings. We're trying to erase and get rid of all this negative, evil stuff that's happening specifically in America to come back to the roots of what we used to be before we were taken over by some sort of however we want to label it, system. Brain work. So trying to think if there's anything else. There's a lot. That was a lot.
I do thank you for that, because you gave us a good framework of what you do in your disciplines in science. And you did do something, you did do a nice little shameless plug that I do want to go back to real quick. Your book, Transcending Victim to Goddess. What inspired you to write this book real quick? Because you understand why I'm asking you this real quick. I understand, like, you help people, right?
Yeah.
But at some point you thinking, you're like, maybe, because some authors that I talk to, they write a book for archival sake. Some people write it for informative, and some people write it as a reference. What format did you feel that you had to write this book in?
That's a great question, and no one has asked me that. I wrote this book with my father on the other side. And I started to hear his voice when he passed away in 2022. I had a lot of issues with my father. My father did not protect me. He was the jokester. He was out to lunch because of his own childhood abuse. And he told me to take my first book I wrote 10 years ago, Victim to Victory, off the shelf. Well, I wasn't promoting that book. I never promoted it. It was a book God led when I was really, really sick to write. And it was great because it got me all my private clients. People that were supposed to find it, found it. That's the magic of something that we can't define, because I never promoted it. But it didn't really stand true after 10 years of a career. A lot of the things I mentioned in that first book, I would not promote now. So that's the development of me in my work. Also, I was still writing from behind a little girl's mask. And my dad wanted to pick 8 chapters out, rewrite them from a healed child's point of view, but also have questions after each chapter, meditations to introduce the foundation of how I got to where I got, because the book 2 part gets real deep. So he was like, we need to sort of set the stage. So each chapter, I'm a great storyteller. I've got great stories, besides chapter 1, which is no fun because it's the childhood abuse. But chapter 2 goes right into New York City and how I met these tap masters, and it's very magical. And then it's a lot of the theater arts in my teaching career and how things just show up, but there's no coincidence. When you choose to work on yourself Your life's going to change. And it may be a little shaky for a while, but it's going to be magical at one point. I can guarantee you that. You're going to move through a tunnel, and then all of a sudden, there's going to be options you didn't even think were possible for you. That's the benefit of saying yes to healing yourself. So we wanted a book that if I did a group workshop, I could talk to the people about their answers, after chapter 1 or chapter 2, that I could go into an organization and teach their staff, and we could have conversation about the questions and start to talk about why the medical meditations are different. He wanted it to be interactive, and he didn't want it to just be a passive story. I have incredible stories. I've lived a really interesting life because I've chosen to take the road less traveled, but we didn't want it to just be passive. We wanted it to be, what's your story? Because when I sat across from so many people, they downplayed so much of their life. And when I started to pick them apart as they're crying and shaking, and I would give them writing assignments, they'd come back and start to see that they had magical things that they couldn't even see. They couldn't even understand. So that's where this tool comes into place. And the goddess is simple. It goes for men and women. The goddess is the disrespect of the women in my bloodline. And also the back of the cover is sort of the stance of my father allowed that to happen. So, the men have to heal their wounds. And how are they shaping themselves in the workplace, and how are they shaping themselves in the marriage place? Book 2 goes into past lives and my dad on his deathbed and all kinds of stuff. I also share some timeline differences in book 1. So what does that mean for somebody? They're sitting in front of me and they're doing a brain meditation. They're chanting Sanskrit, or they're doing breath patterns. And all of a sudden a memory comes up. Write it down. Or all of a sudden it comes into their body, a pain. What's that pain about? And then they're dreaming about something. And they're like, well, I don't know why I'm having this dream about the Holocaust. Is it because your family member was in a Holocaust? Or is it because you were in a Holocaust in a past life? Somehow you're going to figure that out, answer it for yourself, whatever that is, to heal that. That's why we're so ancient in some ways. And I really feel like if people really understood more of themselves, they would be happier. And also it would just seep out into every aspect of their life. But it doesn't mean that the changes aren't easy. I've had to walk away from a lot of people I love because I didn't fit into the box labels that they wanted to continue to put me in as I kept rewiring my brain.
And that's a hard thing to do there, because we always want to we don't want to make people expendable. And I have to give you, like, that's a chop inside this episode that I really I've fallen in love with what you said at the end there, because a lot of people don't understand that not everybody can be carried along. You can archive people, and I say put them in my memories museum, and I still love them. I still will have a feeling in my heart, in my mind for them,
I love
but
that.
I have to move far away from them.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I need to ask about you real quick, because being a caregiver to the world, because that's what you're doing with the mind, how
Mm-hmm.
do you fill that glass up? How do you keep that glass full all the time? How do you do that without self-destructing, or having yourself self-destruct? How do you do that?
That's a really great question. I definitely failed a couple times. So, and that's when I got really, really sick and I had to shut down my business. Um, and what I will say, if that happens, it's going to happen to a lot of caregivers because they overgive and we're not taught these things. And sometimes you have to go through. But what those tough times taught me is that I learned I showed up for everybody else, but nobody showed up for me when I was sick. Okay. So that's a hard reality. That's something that you have to face. I think that it goes back into me knowing my past lives and what I'm trying to heal with my maternal bloodline, a lot of slavery, right? So slaves didn't have a life. They only were programmed to do for others. And in some ways, I was that. So through every healing, every crisis, every business, when I had to close my business for a while, I upgraded in self-care. So my self-care is mandatory now. It's not questionable. I only work so many hours a day. If somebody has a bad, I've turned down a lot of things or gotten off a lot of calls or group things because I'm a psychic, I'm a medium, I'm very, very sensitive. And I think it's taken me a long time to respect that because nobody else in my family did. And in my environment, it's like it took upgrade after upgrade after upgrade to say, no, this is what I am. So I wish more caregivers would learn this. And part of it too is like, even with the whole business stuff, I mean, back 20 years ago, you were not getting paid what you get paid now to coach trauma. I was doing it for the love of it, but I was not getting paid. You have bills when you have a private practice. You have a lot of bills that people don't really understand. And so when I got into the water business, I didn't plan on getting in the water business, but it helped me financially. I was selling machines. It helped. And I'm getting a tax write-off on something that's helping me heal. I don't think sometimes healers think about that. They don't think about how money is important, how you use money is important. The consumer, I'm constantly teaching because they've spent, I mean, when I had clients where with car accidents, and I looked at medical bills, like thousands of sheets of what they were due for after a car accident, which didn't work, by the way. People don't understand what they're getting paid, even because it's like, oh, insurance covered it. Well, no, somebody paid that. That money's coming somewhere. And because we have such a failed system right now, I don't know what we're going to do, but what I tell people is I paid out of pocket for everything I had. I paid out of pocket even when I took time off. I probably could have filed for disability, and I don't judge people who do. I didn't want to be labeled that. So a lot of hard choices with that, but yeah, it's number one now. And because I've detoxed so much trauma, my body feels so good. I feel so good. Why would you want to go back? So, I don't drink alcohol. I'm always with my water. I practice what I preach. If you go to my house, like I'd have clients fly in from Germany or whatever, and we would do work in a studio, but then sometimes they'd come into the kitchen to see what I'm drinking, what I'm eating, so that what I'm putting them on, I'm actually doing myself. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
it's not like it's the game changer. And so that's, it's partly those things. And I guess the only thing that I can voice to the listener out there is, nobody in my family, we weren't brought up to do this. So I broke a lot of barriers. I broke a lot of insecurities. I broke a lot of negativity through doing the meditations and the brain work and the breath work. There was nobody cheerleading me but me.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, it was you, nobody on the sidelines to help you. Now going a little bit deeper into everything, and I do want to thank you for your time because we had a little scheduling technical mishap on my part on a few things. Here's the thing that I want to know about you in closing. Trauma. Can you define trauma for me in your ecosystem? And then once you define trauma, can you explain to me how the trauma attaches to your whole being? Because um in everything that goes on, you did state earlier that trauma stays stored. We both know it stays stored in your body. Me and you both know that. A lot of audience probably didn't know that. Some people think that it's an inanimate objects and things like that. But could you explain to us trauma in your ecosystem?
Okay, well, in my family traumatic ecosystem, my dad had childhood trauma and my mom had childhood trauma. And then they married young, they had sex, and married. They were high school sweethearts. So through the birth, I'm coming in as this soul with my own soul database. And once my mother starts to get unhappy with my father and start to scream in the household, that's trauma. It's a consistency. It's a high pitch. It's a rage. It's a blaming that is concerning to my soul. Then once my dad loses his job from the family business and depressed, that's trauma. That could bring up memories from past lives of family members, and this is all. And then once my mom comes in at age 8 and starts doing these patterns chronically of trying to choke me to death, that's trauma. These are severe. That's a severe case. That's a severe adversity of trauma to almost be, taken out from age 8 to 9. So the whole ecosystem in my household, once I did ancestral trauma healing on myself, and that's something that I do with other people, it wasn't a surprise that my maternal bloodline, the women, were from slavery or domestic violence. That wasn't a surprise. How do I know I reprogram that? Well, my my genetic red blood cell disorder, let me get that right, is reversed. My bone structure has changed. So there are significant changes medically through the sciences I worked with. As far as trauma, though, we live in a traumatic society. We're living through a time period where every other year in America, there's a huge traumatic situation that happens. And that's affecting everybody, even people that maybe have a bloodline that didn't have as much trauma, right? Trauma shows up in health issues. Trauma shows up in mental issues too, but also parasites do. So when I talk about water and I talk about soil, the reason why we detox that first is to make sure the parasites are out. And we then upgrade the health to see what are the real issues here. People don't understand parasites. We have 3 parasites in tap water in America right now. One can cut the blood barrier of the brain, which can affect the way you think. So getting on a clean water, selling a clean water filter is not a slogan or it's a tool. And so for me, why would I want to do constant brain work if you don't really need half of it? And it's just the parasite we got to get rid of. So, every situation is different. So a lot of people come to me, actually 99.9% of my clients came to me with health issues or mental health issues. Nobody said trauma. And then it was about 4 or 5 hours within the work that the trauma comes out. And then there's a story. And I'll be honest with you, I would say at least 60% of my clients, a lot of trauma. And it started to shock me. So are we living in a world of denial because we don't have a healthcare system educated on this, a mental health care system educated on all these sciences? We could be. We are living in denial in some ways because we're not living as long. I really break the theory. We used to live hundreds and hundreds of years on Mother Earth with no disease. Why don't we live hundreds? I mean, 200, 300. This is a foreign language to most people. And that's why I keep speaking it. Okay, you may live to 100. Some people do. If you study their lives, they're usually very active, fruits and vegetables, very active. You've got to move the body. We're not robots. So that's a big issue in America. But the other thing is the dementia and Alzheimer's is increasing. It's
Yes.
increasing younger and younger. And I've worked 8 years as a private contractor. And you don't want those 2 things. You don't. You want to prevent. And we don't understand too, when people come to me, when you're doing a water protocol, when you're doing a food detox, before you even meditate, you're preventing things as well. We're not waiting for the disease. We're not waiting for, we're getting healthier in a more warrior, martial arts way. So, and I'm a very different coach because I come from that theater background and I come from that warrior background. So I know how to do that dance where it's not just depressing all the time. You know what I mean?
I do. I do. Now, I want to thank you for coming on the show and talking to us. And sorry that this was brief. We will have to have you back on the show at a later date to continue and go deeper into things. But one lasting thing I'd like you to leave with the audience for me, leave them with your imprint. Leave them with how they can meet and greet you across the internet and how they can get intertwined into your system. And I don't know why I'm using ecosystem today, But
Good.
so they can get involved with you and in your atmosphere and in your basically your ecosystem. So please take over real quick. Let us know where we can meet and greet you across the internet. And anything else, audience, I'll tell you the great thing about a podcast is inside the show notes there will be links to where you can meet Heather and you can get involved with her. So the floor is Heather. So Heather, lead us out of here.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. And I would love to come back. You actually, you gave me such important questions that aren't being asked enough. So I thank you for that. The ecosystem is important. It's about really coming into my email address, which is you matter. Think about those words. You matter 108. Look up 108. It's significant spiritually as well as religiously. So you matter 108 at gmail.com. The reason why I say go right there is it may be a little scary for some of you, or it may be a little like, well, you're introducing yourself. You're just saying, hey, I'm in this state or this country. I'm interested in knowing about your events. I'm interested in knowing about your Zoom workshops. Or I'm interested in learning about the water systems. Or I'm interested in, I'm going to definitely have music on Spotify this year, your music. It puts you in a category. I'm not sending out mass emails every week. That's not what I do because I think people are overblown. But that's one way to directly, or I'm interested in bringing you in it for a talk. I'm interested in collaborating with you. How can I get some of this in my neighborhood? You know, the first senior home that I got a job in was through a client. She used her power wisely. She had them, she went to the board of the senior home and she said, we really need this brain work for seniors. I didn't have certain certifications. I had experience. And because my client had that experience with her work, that's how I got in senior homes. So we have to use our connections wisely right now. Now I'm the resume is large, of where I've worked in universities, corporations doing programs. I've worked with senior homes doing programs. I worked in charter schools fixing violence. So it is what it is. But if you're there and you're like, we're having this issue in our neighborhood or our community, what leader can we connect to Heather Ann Ferri? That's how you make a difference. Everybody, we the people, have to come together to make a difference. So my social media stuff is Heather Ann Ferri. I'm not on there 24/7. That's not what I do because I do have some psychic medium abilities. I am very sensitive to energy. So I just send out messages of what I'm trying to attract into create. But I have some interesting stuff on YouTube recently, sending out some messages to a comedian that I get downloads from and different things. And you'll definitely not hear the same verbiage you're hearing everywhere else. And there's a reason for that. I'm not programmed to study the systems, listening all day long. I'm meditating in the forest, working with people and coming on and giving you stuff that probably isn't being all day long, same stuff over and over again. That's a programming in what we would call maybe a matrix, whatever you interpret. So that's Heather Ann Ferri. And I would say my email. I would also say for your listeners, if you're interested in the clean water, the company's multi-pure, they're 53 years in America. What I like about the company is that they offer their customers, anybody actually, you don't even have to be a customer. They do free educational classes once a month. And the water specialist talks about the issues at that moment in America. People are clueless and they're not teaching us what's going on with lawsuits. They're not teaching us any of that. If you're interested in upgrading your water, you can message me or just my free ebook. My free ebook on my website, Heather Ann Ferri, is right below on the first page. And it's called Water Matters. Download it. Please read it. Go through the links. Start to learn what electrolyzed reduced water is, the Japanese device, PubMed, and ask questions. Email me, ask questions. I'm happy to answer them in timely fashion. But with multi-pure, I can offer your audience a 5% discount.
Thank you.
So if they have a piece of paper and pen, that 5% discount when you check out is 436409. So that's 436409. But I want to stress something because this isn't being taught with water filtration. There is a lot of ignorance, unfortunately. You cannot, in my interpretation, this is my psychology, I'm not representing a company. When you go into your house or apartment, it depends on, and if you can ask me questions online. A lot of people go, well, I just want a home system, buy my water heater down in the basement. Great. Multi-Pure has that. But guess what? You're still going to need an under-the-counter kitchen water filter, a separate one for a separate job. And you're like, well, wait, I have a whole home unit. I don't get this. Because the whole home units don't take out the little particles, viruses, bacteria that are now in our water. So you really need to, that's the consultant. 5 minutes with me sets you on the right path. Somebody that's been in it for 18 years and sees all, a lot of people buy things, they don't even understand that they're not even regulated. There's not even third-party certifications. So you really need to, like, this is the wake-up call with that, because I learned a lot of the ins and outs. And it's a shame that we have to get so detailed that it can't be one thing. But then if you're upset about it, join the team and fight the battle, because there is a battle with water right now. People don't understand forever chemicals is 12,000 chemicals labeled into a label of called forever chemicals. When we talk about trauma, when we talk about healing brain, these are serious issues. So that's my little soapbox with that. You can put the link down below for that. And I would just say to everybody today, thank you for listening, and thank you for having me on, JR. You know, part of my mission is using my voice, because I was almost choked to death as a little girl. I wasn't allowed to speak growing up. A lot of my ancestors never had the right to speak. And so me speaking today helps heal my generational lineage. And every one of you who is listening today, you're a part of that movement. And so I send you blessings and I send you thank you.
And I thank everybody for listening. And I'm glad this is my comeback episode. Thank you, Heather, for coming on the show. And one other thing, at the end of the show, like I tell everybody, that after part of a podcast is the show notes. And from the show notes, depending on what type of podcaster you listen to, you'll be able to follow the links, at least if you're on Spotify, iHeart, Pandora, or Apple, directly to Heather. So on that note, I'm JR, and we're going to let the lady that does the outro do her thing.
Please follow WV Uncommonplace on Instagram, Tumblr, Twitter, TikTok, where we have some great content, Facebook, LinkedIn. Hit up the merch store at oncommonplace.square.site. Join the email list from the website, and rate, subscribe, and give feedback from your favorite podcatcher. And lastly, thanks for listening, and tune into the next episode.